Welcome to Masters of Self University podcast, your highest source of sacred truths and universal wisdom. Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Rachel Fiori, mystic, spiritual teacher, psychic healer, and founder of Masters of Self University. Join our journey of soul transformation as we deep dive into this latest episode. Hello, beautiful souls, mystical, divine beings. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Masters of Self University podcast. I'm Rachel Fiori, your host for this episode. And what we're going to dive into today is how patriarchy creates psychopaths. Isn't this a fascinating topic? So let's first understand the definition of what a psychopath is, what psychopathy actually is. I'm going to read this word for this part, okay? Psychopathy is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by, this is key, marked by deficient emotional responses, lack of empathy, and poor behavioral controls, commonly resulting in persistent antisocial deviance and criminal behavior. Commonly resulting in, doesn't have to result in that, commonly resulting in. Let me say this one more time. This is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses, a lack of empathy, and poor behavioral controls. Wow, listen to that definition. Now, I want to remind you when it says a lack of empathy, because most people think when they look up what a psychopath is, it will often describe a psychopath as having a lack of empathy, no ability to have empathy, like it's just missing. But I want you to understand what empathy is. It's emotion. Empathy is an emotion. Do you understand that? Literally, that is an emotion. So when we say deficient emotional responses, empathy is just one of the areas that a psychopath is deficient in. So let's go a little deeper, okay? With all of, psychiatry, psychologists, forensic psychologists, for example, anybody who specializes in this field, when you learn from what they have to teach and what they've learned and shared over the decades, let's go a little deeper in understanding. There is a lack of emotion. Now, we know that part. This is the easy part, but I want you to stay with me because this is really critical to how patriarchy designs the way in which we raise boys and men. So stay with me because I'm hoping you're going to have some epiphanies, hopefully one big, massive epiphany by the end of this episode. So we often describe psychopaths. Now we're thinking of the extreme ones. So think of a psychopath on a scale of 1 to 10. Remember, a psychopath isn't born a psychopath. He's made into one. Okay. You understand that? I've used this example before. The extreme form of a psychopath, we could say easily, is a serial killer. Okay. A murderer, somebody who has murdered somebody or murdered several people or many people. Okay. That's a psychopath, right? So, and I'm going to name a few and give you examples in a few minutes here. These people have no remorse, no empathy. There's no compassion. There's none of that. We already understand this extreme form of psychopathy. We understand this extreme. This is like the worst that you can become as a psychopath, that your emotions for the most part are essentially gone. Let's say that's on a scale of 1 to 10, that's a 10, right? But it doesn't mean that even serial killers don't still have some emotion in there sometimes. This is really important to understand this. To just label them as monsters and dismiss them, wonder what created a lot of these emotions that led them to having no more emotions. They've been so suppressed. Dismissiveness. So maybe let's grow up and mature a little bit because we don't like the topic, or this is kind of a gruesome topic. Let's be a little more emotionally mature than what patriarchy has taught us to be in regards to all of this stuff. Emotional maturity means I'm willing to learn about a topic, even if it's uncomfortable. I'm willing to evolve into the ways of oneness, the universal ways of oneness consciousness. The way of truth is one of them. I am willing to learn. I'm willing to become more mature, even when it comes to things that are uncomfortable for me. Why am I uncomfortable? Well, I haven't been allowed in this society, in our world culture, in our patriarchal culture, to learn how to connect to my divine power when it comes to things that make me uncomfortable, nervous, trigger me. Oh, these are all pathways to becoming a psychopath. I can't handle shit emotionally. So if we go deeper, we understand that all psychopaths, even the really extreme ones like serial killers, were babies just like you and I. They were not psychopaths at 1 year old. They weren't aggressively, killing things, violently murdering at 1, at 2. They were dismissed a lot. A lot of times our main 4 types of major dysfunctional type of parenting, okay, is a disengaged parenting style, disengaged. A rigid parenting style, permissive parenting style, enmeshed parenting style. Okay. And here is where our programs start. You then have a patriarchal society that teaches everyone in the fucking world that emotions are bad and weak and crazy. No. Oh, what have we learned? Even though things are finally starting to change, what have we learned in our patriarchal ruling, governing us for centuries? Emotions are weak. Emotions are crazy. Women are crazy because they're the ones connected to emotion. And what have we learned? We have learned in our upside down world, we are the fallen world, living in the fallen world. What we've learned, psychopaths are the psychopaths. And who are the psychopaths? The ones who don't feel the fucking emotions. Let that sink in. When you are so disconnected from your emotional impact on yourself and others, you are in some way, shape, or form running the very fucking programs that psychopaths run. Take a deep breath and open your heart, because this is kicking some of you in the gut. This is making some of your hearts ache. And yet, if we aren't fucking mature enough to deal with the goddamn truth in our society and how we are being raised, brainwashed, and manipulated, none of this will heal. There is no new earth coming to fucking save you. Jesus isn't going to appear and save you and do it for you, you emotionally fragile, weak, powerless, pathetic, brainwashed person by the fucking patriarchy. You are here to grow up, mature, heal, become powerful, connect to your divinity yourself. That's what you're here to do. You have that power inside of you. Come learn how to connect to it. And stop thinking someone outside of you is going to fucking save you. Because what's outside of us in the macro and the collective is all of the evidence of the manipulation and the brainwashing. So let's go more deeply into it so we can understand it better. When children are raised, they go through phases when they are being raised in whatever type of dysfunctional parenting, whatever type of dysfunctional cultural influences, whatever traumas they may be experiencing to varying degrees. Our patriarchal world teaches that Emotions are weak when, here's the truth, take a deep breath. Men are far more emotional than women are. Men are far more sensitive by nature than women are. But we're taught that emotions and sensitivities are weakness. Now, women who are the master of emotions, we feel them, we move through them, we can discern them. You learn to translate emotions and what they mean and why they're here. There is a wealth of wisdom in emotions. It lets you know if you're running programs, depending on the emotions you're feeling. It alerts you that something is triggered, a wound has been activated, and there is healing that needs to happen here. The empathy, the feeling, the energetic experiencing, which means you feel it in your own body, emotion that other people around you are feeling. That's what an empath has the ability to do. That's what some people with certain psychic abilities, their psychic emotional abilities, that you can feel what another person is feeling. So you can feel their pain. That allows you to become one of the enlightened characteristics, vibrational frequencies of the way of compassion, among other ways. Harmlessness and gentleness is another universal way of oneness. It allows you to become that. Why? Well, if we learn how to feel emotions, interpret emotions, translate emotions from the way of wisdom, from a place of wisdom, one of the other universal ways of oneness, if we learn how to translate and speak the language of emotion, that's what a woman or women innately know how to do, that they're masters in that. Okay, when they're connected to their divinity. I'm not talking about unconscious, toxic masculine or toxic feminine, wounded women. I'm talking about evolved women who are connected fully to their intuition. Okay, let's be clear on that. Women innately, naturally, this is what women are masters of. And this is where men need to learn how to heal all of their wounding from the patriarchy, because you have been devastated by it. You have been destroyed as men, and you have been manipulated and lied to and told that you're strong when really you're the weak ones. Anybody who's not connected, man or woman, anybody who's not connected to their emotions and has no fucking idea how to decipher the emotion, what it means, how it's guiding them, and what to do with it and why and how, you are living in divine disconnection. You're living in pure ignorance. You are a brainwashed puppet being manipulated by the elites, by those that know that if they can brainwash you in these ways, they get to control you more easily. They get to trick everybody into, when we keep men on this path of varying degrees of being psychopaths because they're completely disconnected from their emotion, which leads them to become aggressive, violent to varying degrees, then we live in a very unsafe society. Society is unsafe because men are the ones who are unsafe, generally speaking. They are the perpetrators, generally speaking. They're the mass shooters. They're the ones shooting up schools, generally speaking. It's almost always men. This is just truth. This isn't male bashing. This is speaking the fucking truth. You have to be mature enough, grow up enough to receive the goddamn truth and understand that what we've been brainwashed to believe, that we're so proud of, logical thinkers. Oh my God, you want the truth in that? Your logic, your ability to rationalize and think logically is 100% connected to your emotional IQ. And this is the scariest part of how psychopaths are born, how the patriarch creates psychopaths to varying degrees, creates programs of psychopathy in men that are running, creating domestic violence, rape, all of the domination programs that men are taught to run and be and become. Like, you're taught to become that, for Christ's sake. Don't get fucking defensive about it. That's stupid. To stop wasting our time in defensiveness. Open your heart. This isn't the true nature of what you are. It's what the majority of men have become because you've been brainwashed and manipulated to become that. You've been tricked into it. It's now time to stop living in the fallen earth, in the upside down world, and it's time to connect to our divinity and right everything, right all of our twisted wrongs, and really dive into a deep level of education when it comes to this mystical education, spiritual education, the way of truth, the way of harmlessness and gentleness, the way of compassion, so that we can actually start to live from a place of oneness consciousness. Can't live there if you don't become it yourself. Do you understand that? So we have to become it. So logic and reason, let's talk about that, because it's, of course, more of the bullshit that's thrown out there in the world of men are logical, men. No, first of all humans are. Doesn't make any fucking sense to say that, women don't use logic and reason. Here's the difference between brainwashed, patriarchal, raised men, unhealed women. Here's the difference. Your logic and reasoning is actually connected to, and it is based on your emotional intelligence, period, end. I want you to observe children. This will make it very simple for you. Observe the logic and the reasoning that children will give you at age 4. Yeah, but you do it because of this. Yeah, but it's because I want this. Well, we're going to eat dinner in 10 minutes. Why do you want a snack? Well, because I'm hungry and I want it. That's very logical, isn't it? Now, does it make sense in the grander scheme of things? Are they able to look at the entire scenario? Because that's a feminine energy. Are they able to look at an entire scenario? Are they able to look beyond what they just want right here, right now? I want, but I want this, but I'm hungry. Okay. When we are raising children, if we were more evolved beings, we would be able to guide them in these moments. What does it mean to want and not get? Let's learn how to process that emotion. Okay. When we don't learn those skills growing up, our EQ stays very fucking low. We have to learn how to embrace the emotions that we feel because they're normal human emotions. And we learn to understand why they're there. Well, why do I then get frustrated and angry and throw a fucking tantrum that I don't get what I want right now? Because I'm emotionally immature. I haven't developed enough yet for that to come online. And it comes online slowly over time. And it doesn't come naturally like most people assume. It needs to be taught to us. Do you understand? Empathy is a very, very tricky. It's even what to call it is very tricky if you really understand the psychology of it. If you don't study or haven't studied psychology, it's why I try to keep things very, very, very as simple as I can so that the average person can just get all of this, learn from it, and evolve. Okay. Empathy is very tricky because when that starts to show itself in children, the majority of the time, what adults do in their ignorance and their unconsciousness, they dismiss it. They make fun of it. They force the child. They embarrass the child without realizing they're embarrassing the child. They're shunning the child, shaming the child without even having any awareness that that is what they're doing. And a lot of times it is very unintentional. Just because it's unintentional doesn't mean that's not what you're doing. And so these emotions are forced into suppression, self-suppression of these emotions. And what happens? Shame is a result because you were just embarrassed. You were made fun of. You were teased. You were dismissed, ignored, laughed at, whatever. Why are you upset about that? Knock it off. Instead of all that made you upset. And then learning the process to move through that with a child. And it doesn't mean to make every single emotion a child ever feels in fucking life a big fucking deal, because that's the pendulum swings in some parenting, and they think, oh, I'm a woke parent. I'm consciously parenting. And you're not at all. All you did was swing the fucking pendulum to the opposite side of the spectrum. You're still living in duality. You're still living in unconsciousness. You act like every fucking thing your child feels is the big fucking deal, and let's spend 3 hours on it. That's the opposite. That's just the different side of the same coin. It's learning how to balance this stuff. Obviously, I'm going to teach everybody how to do that right in this episode. That's not specifically what this episode is on. I just want you to be aware of that, though. Okay? When we in our patriarchal society teach that what you want is the main thing that matters, and this is what's taught to men, what you want matters, and that's the main number one thing that matters. So we're teaching selfishness, we're teaching entitlement, we're teaching domination, we're teaching control. Okay? We are forcing the suppression of emotion from the time little boys are little boys, that it's not okay that you feel that, right? That's where we've come from in the past for centuries, right? Toughen up. When the truth is, boys are way more sensitive than girls. Way more sensitive emotionally. We come here, we're born with different traits as men and women. And generally speaking, men, little boys, are far more fucking sensitive than little girls are, as a general understanding. Things affect them way more easily, generally speaking. And the scary thing about that, the sad, devastating thing about that, the traumatic thing about that is by calling them weak, we are actually trapping them in weakness. By forcing them to suppress their emotions, we are preventing them from learning the language of emotion. They don't know how to master their emotions because we force them to suppress. And then the only way that suppression is going to come out is in aggression, violence, harm, crime, criminal behavior, beating people up, domestic violence and abuse. These are all programs, mental programs and emotional programs of psychopaths, leading up to the point where you cross that threshold of clinically being a psychopath. And guess what? That definition of psychopath, notice the definition. I'm going to read it word for word one more time. Psychopathy is a neuropsychiatric disorder marked by deficient emotional responses, lack of empathy, commonly, and poor behavioral controls. Okay, commonly resulting in persistent antisocial deviance and criminal behavior. It doesn't say you have to be a murderer or a serial killer to be a psychopath. Do you understand that? You're not a psychopath. You didn't cross the threshold once you became the killer. You are a psychopath far before. You don't ever have to become a murderer to be a psychopath. You think a man who forces himself on a woman and thinks that's okay and objectifies women is not a psychopath? Oh, now we're getting to it, aren't we? So let's go a little deeper. I'm going to give you some examples. So, there's a killer that bludgeoned his mom to death at the age of 18 years old. His name was Kevin Davis. And Kevin, when he murdered his mom, when you watch the interview of him with the police, everything's very logical. Well, I mean, did you see the scene? Did you go in and look at it yet? Obviously, you can tell what happened, what I did. And he just explains why. Well, this is why I did it. And it's very logical. There's a lot of reason. And another example, this is what I want you to stay with me for a minute, because the logic and the reason behind it's like, hello, it's very logical why I did what I did. And these are the programs I want to bring to your attention. in this episode because these programs are very common. When we justify what we do and how we behave in the world, how we behave towards other people, how we behave towards women, how we behave, we justify it with our fucking logic and reasoning. And that's the scariest part. I just saw on social media recently a guy flipping out on a podcast going, "It doesn't make any sense. You want me to protect you in the middle of the night if somebody breaks in, but you want me to you don't want to have sex based on your emotions? That's your duty to have sex, Chloe. Isn't it my duty to protect you?" This was the fucking logic and reason that this psychopath on a podcast is giving to people, to women, to men, to the world. This is my logic and reasoning based on emotion. Why would we base anything on emotion? Well, you don't when you're a psychopath. Emotion isn't involved when you're a psychopath. Emotion isn't involved when you view a woman as an object because you're objectifying her. And a psychopath who's a murderer, when he murders somebody, that's not personal either. Do you know that? That's the program. That right there is a behavior. It's not personal. You're an object. When Chris Nielsen murdered 4 people, he murdered a man at a B&B. He lived there. And he murdered him. I just didn't like his presence. I didn't like him. I didn't want him to be there. So in order for him to not be there, I kill him. That's the premise of those. Very logical. You see it? Psychopaths use nothing but logic. Do you see why it isn't fucking good enough to just say, "I'm logical, I use my brain, I think, I'm rational. That makes me intelligent. And that means I am more reasonable and I should be a leader and I should be in charge and lead the world and tell everybody what to do and I should tell women what to do because I'm reasonable, I'm rational, and I'm logical." In your fucking crazy mind you are, because you're disconnected from any level of EQ. And when that disconnection is there, when the universal way of oneness, the way of connection, that energetic, emotional connection to divinity itself, to your higher soul, that's the enlightened characteristic and vibrational frequency of the way of connection. If you haven't yet read the 20 Universal Ways of Oneness, grab it on Amazon. You can start reading about them today, or as soon as it's delivered in a day or two. The way of connection. I'm disconnected emotionally. Energetically, I am disconnected from my divine power, my divinity, my soul. And if I am disconnected from that, I don't look at you as anything but an object. It's no different than this coffee mug that I have right here. You're just a mug. It's the microphone. It's an object that I'm speaking into. That's it. This is a microphone. I'm looking into a camera. I'm looking at my computer screen. They're objects. So when this guy, Chris Nielsen, he's understand that traits and signs of a psychopath they are indifferent to the content they are talking about. The content is the person they murdered. They're indifferent. And they use logic and reasoning and rationale when they say, "So you just didn't want to be in his presence. So you took him out in the woods and killed him." Oh, and then the woman that owned this place, the B&B, she's going to start asking questions. Obviously, I have to kill her too. That's very logical. So I kill her too. And then when her daughter and friends show up to find out where mom is, obviously, I have to kill them. That's very logical in my mind when I am completely disconnected from emotion, compassion. These are emotions. Compassion is an emotion. Empathy is an emotion. When I am severed from them, it's very logical. And when men like this are questioned, They smirk and they laugh. Other serial killers, think about it. The Night Stalker in California, when they were questioning him and interviewing him, well, what made you go into this house? The door was unlocked. That's very logical. Well, the window was open. Like, duh. The window was open. Hello, of course I'm going to go in and rape and murder people in the house. The window was open. It's like an invitation for me to come inside. And when the door was locked and the windows were locked, this particular serial killer, the Night Stalker, would go to the next house. Very logical. He rationalized, this one's locked. I'll just go to the next house and I'll go look around and see if any windows are open. Oh, easy entrance, easy way in. And then he would do what he would do to people. The logic isn't fucking good enough, people. Stop being manipulated and brainwashed by patriarchal standards to just use logic and reason, when your logic and reason is based on your emotional IQ level of the toddler that you're trapped in, your unhealed inner child. When you've been forced to suppress your emotions, then you have a low EQ. And when you are emotionally fragile because you're not emotionally intelligent enough, you haven't learned how to powerfully master emotions. What that means, it doesn't mean the patriarchal definition of master, that you're going to control your emotions and force them out, and bleh. That's patriarchal conditioning. That is not emotional intelligence. To become powerful means, and to master what it means, you learn to take emotions. Oh, why is that emotion here? This is a divine level of logic and reasoning, and it's very practical. But oneness consciousness doesn't exclude and separate logic from emotion. That's fucking separation consciousness, which comes from the patriarch. You're either logical or you're emotional. You're fucking crazy when that's what you think and how you function. You are literally functioning in distortion because you yourself are separated, disconnected. These things aren't disconnected. They work together like two puzzle pieces fitting perfectly together. Your emotional IQ is what allows your logic and reason to be of high intelligence. And I'm not talking about intellect. We don't rely on our brains to lead us. Leaders who are good leaders do not rely on mental programs, left brain thinking, the mind to fucking lead them anywhere. That is not a good leader. It's not a leader at all. That is a fucked up person in distortion and dysfunction when they are completely severed or disconnected from their emotional body. Don't you dare live in duality, separation consciousness, patriarchal consciousness that then teaches you, oh, well, your emotions rule you. Well, that means you're out of control if your emotions rule you. Hello? When you flip out and lose it and can't control yourself, that's losing control. That means your emotions are controlling you. You are not in your power in those moments. So that patriarchal definition of over emotional because you feel things, that's not over emotional. You shooting people at a concert is over emotional. Guess what? Extreme over emotion of rage and murder and raping and all the things that happen in our world that men do and the crimes they commit, that over emotion is the same goddamn behavioral program as no emotion. Other serial killers, Kemper, rage, and yet no emotion when he's killing women, but it was a hidden, buried rage against his mother. But no emotion when he's killing women, however many women he killed. Abandonment, the agony of loneliness, the fear of loneliness existed in Jeffrey Dahmer. This severe psychopathic level of fear of loneliness, of abandonment is what he developed and lived with. And then he used logic and reasoning for what he did. Stay with me. Are you learning? Are you allowing yourself to be educated right now? Well, why did you kill those men, Jeffrey Dahmer? Well, so they wouldn't leave. They were going to leave. I didn't want them to leave. Like, duh. Okay. Well, why did you start trying to turn some of them into zombies? Well, because I wanted them alive. They were better used to me alive, but I still didn't want them to leave. Very logical. That's like, hello. Of course, that's why. What are you talking about? And yet the distortions, those behavioral programs, because that's what they are, they're behavioral programs. Those distorted behavioral programs stem from distorted emotions, disconnected from emotion. Why? Because the pain, the abuse is so bad, the emotional abuse or psychological abuse is so bad, the disengaged parenting, the abandonment is so severe and bad, I'm developing distorted emotional responses, and it's very painful. Abandonment is very painful. And I'm an emotional, sensitive little boy with no one around me at a level of consciousness that's healthy enough mentally, emotionally, spiritually. We live in a patriarchal world that teaches us all fucked up, distorted shit. That's all I have to learn from. So guess what happens to me? And that's the path that I then go on. Because I'm trying to bury and suppress the loneliness and the agony and the fear of abandonment that I feel. Do you understand that these are the patterns that create psychopaths? Do you understand that you're not 2 years old one day and then 4 years old, you're just a psychopath? Do you understand this is a process that happens over time, that is reinforced by our culture, by our world? It is reinforced in every fucking way we can imagine. And we wonder why we're struggling so much. We wonder why the mental health of men is struggling so much. It is time to wake up. I mean, for real, to actually awaken for real and learn where we really need to go, what we really need to do to heal all of this and set it on a path to wholeness. Okay? Because here is the truth. The Ted Bundys of the world, the John Wayne Gacy, again, logic and reason, but disconnected. The emotional IQ is so low or non-existent. The emotional IQ of a John Wayne Gacy, the logic and reason when he was like, well, no, I mean, obviously it's a lot easier to torture and murder somebody if they're handcuffed. So I needed to get them like bound. So I'd trick them. I'd do the handcuff trick. And then they're under my control. And that's just obvious logic. So all you men out there that are boasting and so proud that you use logic and reasoning, every fucking human being on the planet uses logic and reasoning, you fucking idiots. Now I'm talking about the extreme, like incels and the men who really are exhibiting signs of being psychopaths to nth degree because they're abusing women and they're violent and they're promoting violence and blah, blah, blah. But you need to understand this, especially men, because there are a lot of you men out there who are doing work. You're trying, you're healing. And yet, if you're not getting this level of education, the mental programs, the emotional programs that create psychopathic programs, if you think that does not include you, if this scares you and you're running, guess what? You're part of the problem. You're not healing. I don't care how many men's groups you're in. If you're not getting this level of education in your men's groups, you're fucking missing it. And you wonder why these programs that we are running that we're not even aware of, your marriage is so unhappy. You're suffering in your romantic relationships. And if your mind goes to, when you hear this, You're just blaming men. You're part of the fucking problem. That right there, defensiveness, that dualistic thinking where if I'm referring mostly to men right now, that must mean I'm saying men are all bad and women are all good. If that's how you fucking think, that's what I'm pointing out to you. That is the fucking manipulative brainwashing of patriarchal teachings. That's how your mind immediately thinks. And that's the scary part. Men are logical. That's scary. That is really fucking scary because you can justify and rationalize any and all of your fucking behaviors, no matter how wrong, distorted, dysfunctional, violent they are. You'll justify them and rationalize them. Why? Because that's what you've been brainwashed to do. And if we have a world where we have men who can justify and rationalize being violent, raping and objectifying women, do you understand that when I use these extreme examples of psychopaths, like the murderers and the serial killers, the people they murdered are just objects. And we live in a goddamn patriarchal world where men are taught to view women as nothing but objects. You're literally being taught to be psychopaths to varying degrees. Well, I just masturbate to porn, even though it's violence against women, because I want to. It's objectifying women. They're objects for my pleasure. That's how psychopaths think. That's how psychopaths behave. Well, because I want it. I expect to have sex. I expect my partner, my wife, my spouse to give it to me because I want it, because I'm horny. Hello, logical thinking. But I'm horny. I've been brainwashed to believe sex is a fucking need. Psychopathic belief systems in order to manipulate and control people. So if I've been brainwashed to believe in the upside down world and in this fallen earth that's a need, what am I going to do to get my needs met? That's just it's just logical, rational thinking based on the emotional IQ of a baby or a toddler. Do you see it? Number one importance is to see the programs and learn to connect to our divine selves. Our divine selves in human form are emotional beings. Period. Motherfucking end. There is no such thing that you are not an emotional being. Whether you are a man or a woman, there's no fucking such thing. That's part of the deal of being in this video game called Living on Earth as a Human. In this video game that we're here playing, you're here to experience a full spectrum of emotions. Period. End. That's one of the biggest things you're here to experience. It is unique to being an animal, and which we are animals, of course, animals, beings in manifested physical form. We all have emotions. That's part of the deal of being here on this planet. There is no such thing that you don't have them unless you've become a psychopath. I don't have emotion about anything. Great. Now you know where you need to heal because they're all fucking suppressed. Now, the elites who want people, why would anybody want the world to be this way? Because that's how you're easily controlled. Because if we make men dangerous, if we make men volatile, if we make men extremely reactionary, hello, that's emotional when you freak out and shoot people and punch the wall, get in fights, aggressively abuse, murder. Like, hello, that's emotional reaction. So those lower forms of the psychopathic behavior programs that you've learned, that you're not a 10, you might be a 3 or a 4 on the scale. Yeah, those are the behaviors that you exhibit. And all of them stem from deep buried emotions that you don't know how to deal with. So why would a patriarchal world create something like this where it is nothing but abuse to men and women? It's abuse to everybody. I hope you realize that. But I'm specifically talking about the abuse to men in this episode, okay? Why would a patriarchal world, why do the people in charge and the elites want something like that? Well, because the more volatile and scary that men are, the more violent that men are, the more then easily you're brainwashed to believe that we need everybody, everything in the world is unsafe. And because of that, we need soldiers and military and we need fighters. So we create the violence, the brainwashing, the way we raise humans. We create you to be scary and violent murderers or rapists or, aggressors or perpetrators. We create that with the way we raise you in this world. And then we can create the control needed. Oh, look at the scary world we live in. And now government gets to come in and say, well, because everything's so volatile and unsafe, we need to control everything in order to keep you safe. We need to force certain medicines, let's put it that way, on you to keep you safe. We need to force borders and control and to keep you safe. We need to have lockdowns to keep you safe. Look at our unsafe world. And then you look around and you're like, holy shit, the world really is unsafe. It's really fucking unsafe for women and children, really unsafe. So, okay, keep us safe. And then you have all these men jumping, I'll keep you safe because they told me I was a protector. Oh, fucking the cycle continues. It's time to wake up from all of this nonsense. Because healing from all of this just naturally creates a safe world for yourself and your emotions and your pain and the challenges in your own individual life. And then it creates that exact same thing for everyone else around you, for the whole world. There's a ripple effect of that. When you're willing to learn all of these programs that you run and you're willing to heal them and elevate out of them, this isn't who you are. I don't care on a scale of 1 to 10 of psychopath of all the emotional, mental, and behavioral programs you can be running that are in alignment with psychopathic programs. You might be a 1 or a 2 or a 3. If it isn't a 0, you got work to do. Do you understand? And there's no shame in that. And there's no judgment in that at all. There's no criticism in any of this. Just facts. It's just truth. And it is truth that we need to learn to emotionally grow up and embrace in order to heal it. Because here is also the truth that men are suffering, and they're suffering because of the fucking brainwashing and the programs and the teachings of the patriarchal society. Okay. That does not come from oneness consciousness. It doesn't. It comes from separation consciousness of programs filled with programs of domination, control, manipulation, abuse, etc., inequality, superior, inferior program. Enough is enough. And when you're running those programs to whatever degrees inside of yourself, of course your romantic relationships and your marriages are suffering. Of course dating is awful because people are waking up to these programs. Men and women are waking up to these programs. Women have had enough. Okay. And men who are healing are realizing, oh my God, like there's a lot more to this than I realized. And I'm suffering emotionally because of it. Suicide rates, still men. Murdering, all the violence, still men. Predominantly men across the board. Think about it. That's truth. And if you're still such at a low fucking EQ that you can't hear the goddamn truth and not get defensive, you're the fucking problem. That is a part of you that needs to be seen, embraced, loved, healed, not shamed, not judged. But the truth is, holy shit, I'm part of the fucking problem in all of this because that's what I'm feeling. Yeah, so let's start there. It's learning step by step how to see what programs I am actually running, how I am actually showing up in this world versus how I like to think I am. How I like to think I am is living in the upside down world, the fallen world, the patriarchal world of separation, consciousness, domination, control, lies, manipulation, inequality, harm instead of harmlessness and gentleness, instead of compassion, little emotion to no emotion to violence and rage and anger. And that's okay, but then no other emotion. When you lack appropriate emotional responses and you don't know how to move through emotion with maturity, then there is distortion there. Do you understand that? And this includes, by the way, your partner, your children, your wife, when they're uncomfortable, when they're emotional, when they're upset about something and you get uncomfortable and can't fucking handle it, who's the one with the problem? Not her, just because she's feeling emotion, moving through emotion. I don't pretend that I don't move through emotion. I've mastered myself. I've mastered my emotional body. I'm not fucking AI. Neither are you. You're not a motherfucking robot. You have emotion, move through emotion with grace. That doesn't mean you don't feel shit. It doesn't mean you don't get upset or cry or get frustrated or you don't feel lonely or sad. It means when you do, you've learned to drop in, I am the way of connection. It's one of the universal ways of oneness. The way of connection. I connect to my divinity. I am the way of unconditional love. That's another universal way of oneness. I am the way of harmlessness and gentleness. Another universal way of oneness. I am the way of compassion. Another universal way of oneness. I am the way of compassion, 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 unconditional love, harmlessness, and gentleness. Selfless service to me, myself, my emotions right now, because I'm sad or I'm lonely or I'm in pain. I am gain, and it is my responsibility. The way of responsibility, the first universal way of oneness of the 20 that there are, it is my responsibility to go in and learn how to master emotions. Master emotions doesn't mean control, dominate, suppress, destroy, or force. That's that separation consciousness, patriarchal fucking bullshit. Mastering the self. That's why my corporation is called Masters of Self University. High level of education and all of this stuff that you are offered in all of our coaching programs. Okay. But learning how to master the self. Mastering the self means embracing the self in all forms, learning about the self, the small self, the shadow self, my psychopathic programs that have been conditioned in me, that have been imprinted upon me because of our psychopathic fucking society. That I am willing to see that, embrace that, love that, become powerful enough to energetically alchemize those very programs that I, in fact, run until they're gone. I don't run them anymore. There's your emotional sovereignty. There's your emotional freedom. There's your emotional power. Now you're learning how to master the self. And guess what increases with your emotional IQ? As your emotional IQ increases, so does your level of logic and reasoning. Your ability to be practical, to rationally think, to logically think with the union of your EQ raising higher and higher and higher. Now you're becoming a mature, responsible, divine being. Now we're talking. Now there's no knee-jerk emotional reactions where you get so fucking angry and violent that your behaviors become critical and abusive, dismissive to people. The way that you talk to your partner when you're frustrated, over time, you won't even get frustrated anymore. You'll feel peace and love and compassion instead. See, emotions are fucking critical to connect with our divinity, but they're not the emotions of lunacy, of psychopathy, of rage, of domination, of inequality, of superiority or inferiority, any of that fucking crazy shit. It's where do you start to embrace those things within yourself, to alchemize them to a higher level? Energetic alchemy is a process and a skill to gain. It is a process to learn, and it is a high level skill to gain. And you're not gaining it and you're not learning it if you have a low EQ. The EQ has to come up and up and up in order for you to become powerful enough with your energy. Why? The energy of patience is a more powerful energy than impatience. That's why you're becoming more powerful. And the way of patience is one of the ways of oneness. The way of patience is a more powerful energy to utilize and use in a situation that would normally trigger impatient. Impatience is selfishness. You don't give a shit about anybody around you. I'm just so impatient. But what about everybody else around you? What are they going through? The way of truth is a more powerful, divinely powerful energy compared to lying and manipulation. The way of trust is a high level of divine power, energetic power that is a loving power. The way of honoring, another way of oneness. All of these ways of oneness that stem from the teachings of oneness consciousness that we can literally energetically become. That's what's critical here. You don't want to run programs that are connected to, linked to psychopaths. This is what you need to learn. This is what you need to learn. The 20 ways of oneness. I always have my 20 ways of oneness right in front of me, always, as a reminder of what I need to become. And I'm going to invite you to become them too. Read the 20 Universal Ways of Oneness. Get it on Amazon. Visit mastersofselfuniversity.com. Go check out our Divine Heart of Man program to learn what it means to dissolve all of the programs that cause your suffering in life and love, all of the programs that cause you emotional suffering that you are running, that you can learn how to alchemize when you start to become a heart-centered, connected to your divinity being and become the universal ways of oneness. Go check out the Divine Heart of Man. It's coming available. You can check it out on our website. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all next time. Bye for now, everybody.